So Pat, I'm going to assume we're recording. So welcome everyone to our school committee meeting for this Monday, April 20th, 2020. It is 7 o'clock. I would like to call our meeting to order. During these unusual times, we are going to skip our Pledge of Allegiance and student representative. What I do want to do is just a roll call attendance, particularly for school committee members. So Brett Argel, aye, are here.
Lisa Brown, aye.
Kelly Grady, aye. Here.
There we go.
Julie Mulder, aye. Here.
Okay, we had Becky, but she's having technical difficulties. Hopefully she'll be back. And at least our administrators and guests, if you could announce yourselves as well, please.
Sure. Kevin Main, Superintendent.
Cindy Sosha, Principal of the primary school.
Me, I'm Tracy Novick. I'm the field director from MASC.
Great, thank you. And Becky's back. Becky, want to announce yourself, please, if you have sound?
Sorry about that. Becky Charniak, having technical difficulties, but I think they're fixed now.
Okay, great. So, so public comment and communication. School committee welcomes public comment on items within the scope of the school committee's responsibilities, but not on our agenda this evening. I do not see many members of the public here this evening that might want to comment, but I'll pause for a second. Okay, seeing none. Let's move on. Any old business this evening? New business? Okay, we'll move on to our superintendent's report. Mr. Maines, would you mind taking these items in reverse order from what's on the agenda?
All I saw on the agenda was the superintendent search. Did I miss something else?
It was also just the COVID-19 updates and discussion. So if you want to just do superintendent search first, please. And
Yep, we'll do superintendent search first, and I can update you on the COVID later.
Okay, so I guess actually really it probably should be under our, this item should be under our a different part of the agenda, but we're going to go with it anyways. So Ms. Novick's here to discuss our superintendent search. Becky and Julie have been working with her over the last 9 days since we last met. We had our survey out and have gotten 200 responses back. Ms. Novick sent along a write-up of her, I guess, her findings and recommendations so far. And I think that's what you're here to discuss this evening, I believe.
It is. Yes, thank you. So again, I'm sorry to get that to you at short notice. I usually try to get things in writing quicker, but I also wanted to make sure that you had as much feedback as possible, which this is later in my report, but I do want to commend any of you who had anything to do with sharing the survey, because I don't know that I have ever done a search where I've gotten this many responses in this short a time. I have surveys that are out for much longer that don't have 200 responses. So, you know, good job, Douglas.
That's
well
good.
Done. There's essentially a couple of decisions that you need to make this evening in terms of rolling forward. You've already made a couple that have brought us to this point, but there's a bit of a decision regarding timing. There's a little bit of a discussion to have potentially around who you'd like on the screening committee. And then the sort of meat of the recommendation is the question of how you'd like to phrase the position. One thing that Becky and Julie have been working on has been the sort of rest of the posting, which goes through a description of the district, of the town, has a bunch of information regarding enrollment and schools and all of those kinds of things. Those of you who've seen postings before probably are familiar with that. So that pieces of that are still being put together. Also going to try to swipe some of your nice photos off your website if you don't mind to put those in the brochure as well. And what that will go up along with the application once it's all together. So the first order of business this evening is just to nail down timeline. And really, if you've looked at this, there is one decision that you all would need to make. So what we'll do is that once you've agreed on the posting and we have the description and we put it all together, that will go up this week. It will be open and up until May 8th, which is what we had discussed last time. Given the circumstances, I do think that will be enough time. Also, to the discussion we had last time around updates, this is a bit of a side note, but we once again have proven that last minute is how these sorts of things work. We had more than half of our applications for Gloucester come in on Friday, which is when it closed. As I've said before, don't panic if that ends up happening here. While that is going on, the screening committee should be established and should have an initial briefing about what their responsibilities are. My recommendation would be that the screening committee essentially gets selected this week, that they then are able to meet and be briefed on their responsibilities next week, which would mean that they then are in good order and have an idea of how this is supposed to work and have had a chance to ask any questions they might have prior to the closure of the applications. The way that this works, and this is true even when we can actually have everybody get together, is that applications are all electronic. We put them into a Dropbox file, which is secure. Those who are on the screening committee receive access to the Dropbox file once the applications have closed. Generally, I try to do that right away on Saturday morning. They would have the weekend to review the applications, and then my recommendation would be that they plan on scheduling a meeting for the 11th of May, that Monday. Do keep in mind, everyone, that because they are a committee that is making recommendations to the school committee on something that's under your purview, they themselves are also a public body, which means that we need to post their meetings just like we post yours. They will be meeting in executive session. You do have the right to have one round of that, one screening round if that happened. They then, and this is the part where there's a decision for you all to make. If all they do is a paper screen, they then could make the recommendations to you that week. At which point we then would move ahead with scheduling remote visits of some of you all to their districts and of them to Douglas, followed by finalist interviews the week of May 25th, which would then allow you to be making your selection by the 1st of June. Now, the one thing that's different about this than the way that generally we would proceed in a full search with a little bit more time and with people tending to get together in the same room is whether or not you want to have the screening committee do a round of interviews. Generally, they would do a paper screen. They would select some of my finalists. I would call them up and call them in for an initial interview in executive session. That is not public. Their names are not announced. That is not shared. And that is allowed under the open meeting law. The committee then would again deliberate and then would select the finalists to forward to you. That would bump at least a piece of this back by a week because we do need to give them the chance to actually conduct those interviews. We still catch up with this schedule the week of the 18th to essentially have them announced right away on the 18th and then have them immediately move into remote visits and have you moving into remote visits essentially as soon as it's public. And then pick it up back up again with the finalist interviews the week of the 25th and so forth. So that's the initial discussion that you all need to have. Do you want to pause and have that discussion before I go into the next thing, or how do you want to proceed here, Mr.
Mute for a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. So one question I have, and I don't need an answer for this right away, I guess I'll just say my questions. One question I have is sort of how the democratic process works with the search committee. I would think that ideally we would come up with a number of candidates that we all feel good about. But if there's somebody that a handful feel very, let's say, an admin and myself and Julie really would like the entire school committee to see someone, do we do that? Do we need to vote as a school committee on what kind of a we have for sending that? I'm also curious what number to have a teacher from each building, which would be 4 teachers. And then just through conversation, I did see your letter that you sent, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add to it if somebody, and I forget who had mentioned possibly adding a non-parent to the group. Mm-hmm. So if the max that I've sort of seen thrown out there, 2 of us members from the school committee, 4 teachers, 1 admin, 1 student, 1 parent, 1 non-parent would be 10. I would imagine that's a, just a logical problem in terms of schedules. So,
And then once we get to the makeup of the committee, once we get to talking about that part,
okay.
because those are good questions. I guess my question for you all at this point, which is, yay, cat bombing, is what is your preference in terms of your screening committee? Do you want them to conduct interviews before they then bring finalists to you, or do you want them to only conduct a paper screen? Because we can do it either way. That's entirely up to you.
So to me, that kind of depends on the answer to how many there are. If there's a lot of us, then I think we should not do interviews because I think that could be complicated.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion. But if it was a smaller group,
I think I agree with that. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
I agree with that.
So,
Okay,
So
makes
I'll move
sense.
on to the next question.
sorry,
And
Kelly,
come
did
back
you
to
have
this one
something?
then.
Okay, Kelly, do you have something?
I just said it makes sense.
Okay.
So then to go on to that next section, thanks, Becky. We got a good of your own body appointed. I had an initial conversation with Julie and Becky about having your student representative also on, and having a parent was already part of what you wanted to have a conversation about, or already something you wanted to make sure happened. In terms of teachers, how you do it is entirely up to you. The reason I put it this way, we had a conversation about whether or not you want to have one from every school. Outweighing everyone else on the committee. So that would be true whether you had parents or administrators or anyone else. You want to make sure that it essentially ends up being sort of a level playing field in terms of deliberation. So if you put in 4 teachers, then and they have this makeup, although I want to make sure that we get back to what Becky just said, you then would have as many teachers as you have essentially everyone else, which I think you can end up with an unbalanced committee. In terms of having somebody else in the community, that's fantastic. That is absolutely a fine idea. My only caution, which is already sort of in here, is you want to make sure that you are appointing people who already know what the time constraints are, and not just in terms of sort of your deadlines, but also what time they absolutely have to have available. Because particularly, I mean, this is always true of screening committees, because they're always they're the middle piece, so they're always running up against deadlines. There really isn't any flexibility in terms of them being able to miss meetings or that kind of thing, because every single meeting that they have, they are making decisions at. So they have to be trained in open meeting law and ethics in order to actually serve, both for our protection, your protection, candidates' protection, their own protection. So that from my perspective is flexible, but we would want to do that the week of the 27th. They need to make sure that they've got the time available the weekend of the 9th and the 10th to do the review of applications on their own. They would need to be available the evening of May 11th to review the finalists as a meeting in executive session, or to select, if you want to do interviews, semi-finalists. And then if you want to do interviews, you would need the evenings of May 11th. So to add to sort of the tied together decisions that you're making here, from the way that you've framed it in terms of selection and process, I would say that if you make it too big a committee, you probably are making even that piece more complicated. I would say that it doesn't make it more complicated on the interviews. I've run screening committees with 14, 15 members. That's fine. That's not a big deal. As long as all of them can come to all of those days. So really that's the first question, I think, is if your feeling is that that's going to run into a problem, then maybe you want to pull it back in terms of representation. I think you probably are going to be able to find parents who have that flexibility, or, you know, if you make the pool bigger, having people who already have that time available is going to be less of a challenge. But I think that would be essentially the only tension there, in terms of, not just in terms of the teachers, but just in terms of general how big the screening committee gets.
Okay. Julie, you're on mute. No, you're not. Can't hear you though. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you.
Hold on.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can.
Okay. I gotta figure this thing out. So, question, should we also have an administrator? I didn't notice that there was an administrator chosen. I know you wanted to talk about that after, but, I didn't see
certainly
it on
can.
our list.
There are plenty of screening committees who do. I was going off the sort of initial conversations, but yes, you can certainly have an administrator.
Another thought I had, Julie, was that if we have an administrator from one building, then maybe we don't need a teacher. I know administrators
Yeah,
aren't the same, but maybe that would help to represent one building if we don't have a teacher from that building also.
yeah,
Cut down on numbers. I think it's a tricky balance, because I think we want to get you know, good representation from the community and everybody involved in screening it. I also, you know, like the more cooks, the so
well, and that's why also we did that survey, was to actually get people's input. You know, I mean, right now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at resumes. Not everybody knows really how to look at resumes. And you know, some people have. I mean, personally myself, I've done that quite, you know, a lot of times for my occupation and for doing the previous screening. But that's what it's going to be. But how do we actually get a hold of these resumes? How are we going to be able to distribute those to people?
So what will happen is all of the applications are done via PDF to our office, and Anne Marie Martin, who works in our office, who handles all of these things, puts them together in a Dropbox file. Once those are all arranged and complete, that next day I share a link with those who are on the screening committee that is both time sensitive and is case sensitive, and in terms of sort of what it's tied to, that allows them access to the applications electronically. So they will have it electronically for their own review through the screening process. And then usually I make sure that the link expires, so that essentially it times out in terms of their access.
Okay. That makes
another
sense.
one. And now I've lost it. Oh, when we have, in terms of actually building the screening committee, do we have to, in open meeting, discuss like exactly who that is? Like, I mean, we've already mentioned our student representatives. I thought Will Chamberlain made sense because he's a student who's in the process, but I have no idea if he has any interest. I don't know if he has time. Is that the sort of thing that if I were to reach out to him and he was like, no, thank you, I could email another school committee member and say, or Mr. and say, do you have another student in mind so I can reach out to someone else? Or is that, do we have to have a meeting every time we want to talk about?
You don't have to have a meeting to do this. What the committee can do is they can essentially assign either you or Julie or both to make that decision. I've also had committees that have actually had me take all of the applications and like draw straws, given your time constraints, and also that you essentially have people in some slots already. You may want to just do it yourself, but my recommendation would be that become a responsibility that essentially, for the remaining members, that essentially gets outsourced to those who are appointed to the screening committee.
Okay.
But that's my recommendation. It is up to you. If you as a committee want to decide, then yes, you would need to do that in a public meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with you guys making a call on the committee on your membership. Maybe we can decide tonight on what the overall, body would look like, but specific members, I think you guys can make that call.
Yeah, I would appreciate the whole school committee's like consensus on what the makeup would be like and the numbers, if we can get that together.
Okay.
Now I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Mr. Maines?
Brett, could I just make a recommendation that I think it's important to have an administrator on there, but I also think it's important that we have representation from student support services, special education, someone from that group, whether it's a teacher or an administrator, also sit in on that group as well, just to represent that group.
Okay. Good thought. So I had a couple questions for you, Tracy. So when we say posting week of April 20th, we're talking in the next few days here, correct?
Mhm.
Trying to
Yes.
get this posted, by Friday at the latest, hopefully sooner. Gives us 2 weeks that posting's actually live, right? And then it closes on the 8th. Confirm that. What if you get to the 8th and you have 2 applications? Do you extend it? Is there a mechanism for that?
So our intention would probably be to have it out no later than Wednesday. So it's more like 2.5 weeks. We generally shepherd these pretty closely. So it gets blasted out. It gets posted on our website. It gets blasted out over the list that we keep of people who are applying for positions, which is something like 600 at this point. Goes out over the national list. Goes on Twitter and goes on LinkedIn. And then usually what we do is we keep a close eye on applications, and we will issue at least one reminder via social media. And then if we get to say the end of next week and we're concerned about numbers, the first thing that usually we do is we blast out another reminder over the list.
Okay.
Because that tends to be what people are actually watching more than anything else. And that usually shakes some more loose. I also will say, again, I mean, two is unusual, although I've done searches that
Just
were
an example, yeah.
I'm trying to think. We did a couple of regional VOCs, which have smaller numbers. So I'm trying to remember if we had any that were 2 when we got to the end of the first week. I would be surprised. I mean, I think Gloucester closed with 23 on Friday. We were wondering if schools being closed would lower numbers. And it doesn't seem to have so far. We've got a couple of searches that are going on right now.
Is there a number for a district like ours where you would say, yeah, we should extend the deadline?
I would say you want to make sure you have double digits.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I would be surprised if you don't receive that.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say you want to have double digits.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So do we want to make a decision on the composition of the screening committee now, or wait till the end of this discussion?
I kind of feel like we should figure that out now so that we can
Okay.
next steps as we go.
All right. So I think we're all in agreement on the 2 current school committee members that are already appointed. I think we're in agreement on including a student representative if we can. Hopefully Will can do it, but I'm sure Mr. Romano could probably recommend some other folks that might be interested as well. Douglas School's parent, I have at least one parent that reached out to me with interest. Not sure if we've heard from any others, just through distribution of the survey and whatnot.
I've heard.
I know somebody who probably would be interested. I don't know if it's the same person who reached out to you, but
Okay.
I know somebody who would, I've got to believe, would be interested. She mentioned it to me before.
And actually, this is brought my second question. Tracy, how do you typically solicit these members? Same way we solicited the survey, just sending out a blast and saying we're looking for X number of members to join the search committee, or do we just say, hey, neighbor, how'd you like to join the search committee with us? Is it?
If you can turn it around fast enough, it's better to send out a general inquiry. So whatever it is that you did that got all the parents to respond to the survey worked really well.
Okay.
So essentially what you want to do is make sure that they're given clear instructions as to what the requirements are, including the dates, and what information you need from them. So you need to make sure that you're getting back from them what position they intend to be filling, and their commitment that they can be free on those days. And then, my recommendation is that if you were doing this, if you sent it out this week, you would want to give them a deadline essentially of, this weekend to give whoever's making the selection a day or so to make that decision and get back to them. And by the way, part of what I'm happy to do if you want is give people bad news. So if you want me to be the one who sends the email and say you haven't been selected, I can do that too. I've done those before.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we should, I think that we should ask, if there's other parents that really would be interested. Also, as far as, I really think that the high school is very important too. So I don't know if Mr. Romano or like which administrator wants to actually be a part of this, or if we should have just one teacher representing. Like, we don't need a union person. I can't remember how we did it last time. We don't need somebody
We
that's.
need a member of the
union, right?
DTA.
We do need one, right?
It's actually entirely, it's up to the school committee how you want to do this. So in some cases, what the committee will do is say, we want the union to select, or we want the union to vote, which would be two different things. Or in some cases, if you say we want a representative for X and a representative for Y, you can solicit the input directly. Either way works. It is entirely up to you. It is your decision. And then in terms of the administrators, given the small number of administrators you have in the district, it is not unusual for that to be a decision that they essentially kind of make amongst themselves, depending on who has the time. Although again, it is up to the committee, so that if you feel that, as you were just mentioning, you need or was already mentioned earlier, you need representation from a particular section of the central administration, or you need representation from a particular school, that is up to you.
I'm
So
wondering,
at the end of the day, after we get this group together and they look through the resumes and whatnot, ideally the goal is that they're going to send us 3 candidates, and then at that point it then becomes the school committee's job.
Yep.
And how many is there a number, or there's not?
That's up to you. You can
Okay.
say we want X. I usually recommend against committees being too strong on that, because if I've had screening committees say, but actually we want, we feel that there are this many good candidates and we want you to see all of them. Usually a good number is between 5 and 3. You don't want to have 2, because then somebody drops out and you have to start the search over again.
Okay, so
If 5, more than 5 gets unwieldy.
That answers your question, Becky, about if like we're really strong on a candidate and maybe people aren't. I think at the end of the day, it's really the school committee's decision either way.
but it still sounds like Tracy, it's still like a democratic process. So if
Yes.
the admin, if we have a team of 10,
Mhm.
it's 6v4, and Julie and I find ourselves in the minority, that finalist isn't going to make it in front of us. That candidate's not going to make it in front of the school committee as a finalist, correct?
Yes, because your votes don't outweigh anybody else's on the screening
Okay.
committee. Yes.
Okay. Yep. All right. So then ideally we have an odd number anyway, so we don't have to worry about tiebreakers.
I am always a little concerned about even numbers. I will say that in my experience, screening committees tend to operate by a surprising amount of consensus. Just to give you guys a little insight in terms of how I generally recommend how screening committees run, both when they initially meet and are selecting their semifinalists, and then when they select their finalists after having done the interviews. I usually start by just having everybody do a straw poll of, yes, I want to see this person, no, I don't. And in my experience, generally there are clusters. There's some people who just sort of drop right off the bottom. We don't need to talk about them. There's a cluster that there's general agreement. A majority of people want to move them forward. And then there's a couple in the middle that people need to talk about. So rarely have I had a screening committee where there ends up being, not that there's not disagreement, because of course there's disagreement, but there frequently is a lot of consensus, at least around who the top contenders are and who the we're not interested anymore folks are. So yeah, as much as even numbers are a little nerve-wracking, I wouldn't let it be the deciding factor in terms of who you think should be on the screening committee.
Also, will you and your colleagues give us your input on?
If you'd like it, yep, absolutely. We do tend to see most of the applicants in the state one way or the other. So if there are, generally the way that I introduce it to Screening committee is, I'm not going to tell you not to Google because you're going to Google. Just remember that Google is never going to tell you the whole story. So if you want to hear the rest of the story, frequently we know the rest of the story. So please ask because we'll tell you what we know.
Okay. So just going back, I think we're in agreement on our two school committee members getting one student. So I'm just going to, for now, I just as an example, let's say we go with 2 teachers, 1 admin, 1 parent. That brings you to 7 overall committee. Now, if we do want to go with, either a 3rd teacher and let the admin fill in from the odd building out, and then go with 1 community, that gets you up to 9 potentially. And I think it probably still keeps rough balance. But I don't have strong feelings on this one way or the other. I'd be pretty happy with the 2 school committee, the 1 student, the 2 teachers, 1 admin, 1 parent. I'd be fine with that. But if folks feel like we need to broaden it more than that, open to it.
I think I like that. I don't have strong feelings either. If we wanted to make it 9 instead and add the non-parent and an additional teacher, then maybe we could have that 3rd teacher be a special ed teacher. Touch on
I
that.
do that too, to Mr. Mays' point.
I think you really need to have someone from Special Education Student Support Services on that committee.
Do you feel that the DTA will be comfortable with us saying, please make one of your 3 a special ed teacher?
I think yes.
And I've had that happen before. That to Mr. Mains' point, that can be a very valuable way of having that perspective on the committee.
Okay. So sounds like we're maybe going, so I guess, so if we decide on 9 tonight, but we find we're having trouble either getting a non-parent, do we change that, come back, or do we give Julie and Becky the, I guess, permission to make adjustments on the fly and decide to go with either 8 or 7 if they so choose? And I'm probably asking Lisa and Kelly that, do you?
Becky, you know somebody, right, that's a non-parent? Is that who you're gonna ask, maybe?
I have an idea of a family, but I frankly don't know if they have the time.
And the person that I think Kelly's thinking of is going to be, she'll still be a parent, but she won't be a school parent by the time it's time to vote. So she could kind of be both.
You're right, because her last kid is graduating this year.
The family oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just gonna say I'm okay with giving Becky and Julie the latitude to make that decision. Just my 2 points are, I totally agree that the DTA might want a teacher from every building, but that does give 4 votes, and I'm not really comfortable with that. And also, I just forgot my second point, so forget it.
So I should have mentioned this before too. Mr. Reardon was very sounded like they're flexible, sort of like ideally, and it makes sense. It's nice to have a teacher from each building because they're serving a different population. They've got different challenges. But he said that they were flexible, so I think that
I believe that.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like we're okay in principle with going through with the 9-person committee. As talked about earlier, I'll recap it. 2 school committee members that have already been identified, 1 student representative, 3 teachers, 1 admin, 1 parent, 1 non-parent from the community. But we also are okay with Becky and Julie making a call on the fly to cut that down or increase it, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I feel comfortable you guys making a decision how you guys see fit.
And I did remember my second point. It was just that I agree that having an odd number is probably preferable.
Yeah, if you can, but I'm sure you'll work it out if it's not possible. So.
put in a request then that Mrs. Sosha, or I can send out an email if this is easier, that the admins get together and decide which one of you might be inclined. And that way we can fill the gaps let the DTA know so they can fill the gaps from the other buildings.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
That's great.
Okay. Tracy, any recommendation on making that an official motion as far as how we're proceeding with this, or discussion okay?
I think discussion's okay, particularly
Okay.
because you've given, essentially what you've done is you've also given authority to your the two that are representing you on this. I think that's probably wise.
Thank you.
Now, with that many, do you want them to conduct interviews as a screening committee, or do you want them to just do a paper screen? That is a school committee decision as well.
Yep.
What do you recommend, Tracy?
I mean, if you can get people who can give us, I mean, the difference is really going to be that week of the, I need to look at my paper, that week of the 11th. If you can get commitment from the people who are signing up that they can give us several evenings that week of the 11th, I think we can probably still run interviews. I think probably everyone will feel more comfortable if we can run interviews. But we definitely need to make sure we've got the commitment on that week, because we won't have any flexibility in terms of time.
So the idea would be that you would interview, let's say, a dozen, folks that get through the kind of pre-screening, process of just a paper screen, a couple a night, three a night over the course of the week of the 11th there, something like that, or in the day, I guess, however they decide.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, usually, I mean, some numbers of semifinalists vary. I've had as many as like 9 or 10. I've had as few as say 6.
Okay.
But yeah, that's usually what would happen.
Okay. I think we should, my thought is do the interviews if we can. If we can get the commitment from everybody, we do the interviews.
I think that the interviews are huge though, because a paper is a paper, but I mean, some people can look absolutely amazing. I remember sitting in on, I think it was actually the principal search that we did. And it was just like, you're looking at the paper and it's just so different, when you meet the person.
Yeah.
So it's invaluable.
Yeah. No, I think you do that. And I think, again, it's tough times right now, but I think fortunately people have fewer places to go. So getting everybody available for, 3 nights to do interviews, hopefully is a little bit easier.
That was part of my thought, was that while I'm not going to guarantee they're not all going to be on Zoom meetings, at least the number of places they physically will have to be will be fewer.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say that the closure is till May 4th, and we're talking about after May 4th. So it's conceivable we could be back in school at this time.
I appreciate your optimism, Mr. Maines. Hope it so, but
Yep.
Thank you for making that point. Brings a smile to my face. Okay. So we're going to try it. So we're going to go with interviews.
Okay. Very good. All right.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Yep.
You good? All right.
Okay. But again, I guess, I'll give you, I feel comfortable giving you guys the authority to say, we can't get the people, we're just going to do a paper screen as well. So, if whoever is in the committee doesn't have availability for some reason, I think you guys got to be able to adjust on the fly and work with that. So it can't be, I'm not available this week, can we do it next week? It's got to be, we got to move. Right?
I agree.
I agree.
I think you really do want to do interviews to get it, as Julie said, you want to talk to the people.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully everything works out and we can do that.
One quick question. How do we, maybe this is something for offline, but are we going to be able to have access to Zoom through the town?
I don't know that you'll be able to
Every
use the towns because they have some restrictions on the number of meetings that be going on at a single time. So we might have to find some other means. I was actually going to ask Tracy if does MASC have an account that we could utilize, or
We've been working on that. I think we might. Let me find out.
And I think the problem might only be with the streaming part from the town perspective. So I can connect with Pat and figure that out and see if we can use the town's account. But I know they do have a restriction on having 2 meetings at once, and that's probably only a streaming thing, I'm assuming. So.
And the screening committee can't stream anyway because they're meeting executive session. So if that is the
Exactly.
problem, then you're all set.
Yeah, so I'll follow up on that on our end with our cable committee on that. And Tracy, if you can just figure out if there's anything on your end you can do, otherwise we can just get a separate count and work it out. So,
Good. I'm glad you asked that question. I hadn't thought of that.
good job, Julie.
So on to the community input. Like I said, I have had surveys that have been in districts of your size and larger that were out for longer that didn't get the stronger response. So anyone who had anything to do with that, good job, because you had another, I don't know, 35 or something come in over the last 12 hours or something. You had 200 when I closed it this morning. Definitely was a majority parents, but you did have a strong employee response by the end, and you also did have some students and also some members of the community who also chimed in. I did give you a word cloud just to give you an idea of sort of when people were asked to describe the strengths of the district, what words were most often coming up. And there was a lot around sort of the strong educational system, the systems of support, communication. I always think it's a good sign for the current superintendent when one of the words is continue. So take that as a compliment, Mr. Maines, because that is actually one of the words that I saw most often here. That is always a good sign in terms of where we're at. And in reading through the responses, by the way, that was something that came up over and over again, is that the work of the past several years has been something that parents in particular have very much appreciated. They feel that they're sending their children to a stronger school system, that the community is more strongly supporting the schools, and that it is in fact a stronger community as a result. We always start with that, and then we ask, if you looked at the survey, about the challenges that the community saw the district having as they moved forward. What were the things that were were going to be most important for whoever's coming in next? And operating under budgetary constraints, which I know will surprise no one on the committee, continuing to make the district attractive to families, collaborating with the town, extending the use of technology in the classroom, and continuing to ensure and enhance quality education and extracurricular programming for children in Douglas. Communication, but which by the way comes up in almost everything that I do, but it was cited over and over again as a current strength. Parents in particular, again, felt like they were very much involved and engaged and knew what was going on in the school district. It also was seen as something that people wanted to continue to essentially build on. So that came through on really both sides as something that's currently appreciated, that people don't want to lose and they only want to see stronger. I intentionally gave you the sort of the chart to give you an idea of the significant issues facing the town, to not only to sort of give you the list, but to give you an idea of kind of where people weighed them. So definitely the strength of educational excellence was up there, but it was equally weighted with financial management. And then running through the rest of these: curriculum development, school-based technology, educational leadership, communication with parents, you see again, strategic planning, staff relations, and then you end up with a number of things here that have to do with developing staff, special education, professional development, and so forth, including retaining staff. So that gives you some idea of kind of where we end up here when we're looking at how you'll be describing the position. And then I ask for qualities and skills. When I do this in person, I say, it can be something someone has, it can be something someone does, or experience someone had. But we give them a list essentially here. I think I dropped an E when I gave this to you. So again, that budgetary management, fiscal management coming in overwhelmingly strong. Of everyone who took the survey, almost 60% of people said the budget management. Communication skills, well up there. And then again, another funding one here. Success in improving and maintaining high academic performance, with about a third of people responding with that. And then ability to interact with students coming in strong, with about a quarter of people responding there. Understanding and recognizing good teaching, and success in recruitment and retention of high quality staff. So again, that sort of not only having good teachers, but also hanging on to them. So what I do when I put this together is I take all of the responses that you've gotten and then boil them down into some sort of with a description that will go on your posting that says, here essentially is what the district is looking for. Now, do you keep in mind, everybody knows they're applying for a superintendency, and there are things that are in common with every superintendency. They're going to be a superintendent. There's particular things they're going to do. But in terms of what the district needs most now is really what we're trying to describe here. So this description is entirely up to you. This is based off of the information that I've pulled together from the survey. So the lead-in usually is something like the proven candidate will have proven knowledge and experience in finance systems, including fiscal planning, implementation, oversight, reporting, and communication regarding the budget to the school committee and to the public. Demonstrated success in maintaining and improving high academic performance in a district. Communication skills that connect with students, families, staff, municipal and state officials, and the larger public. Capacity for innovative thinking and adaptability in approaches to education. And success in recruiting and maintaining high quality staff working in a positive school climate. So you can do with that description anything you like. Take it, you can change words, you can reorder it, you can whatever, however you want to do it, but this will be what you'll be sharing to say, here's what we think the superintendent needs to be able to do would be.
No, it's good. Any other committees have thoughts on this? You're muted, Julie, or at least I
There we
can't.
go. All right. Quick question, because I know some of this with fiscal planning and financial stuff and all that. Do we know if something's going to happen with our budget, like for next year? Do we know? Do we have any information? We don't have any information, right? So I mean, like, it can totally be cut in half for all we know.
We know we're going into a recession. It's just a matter of how severe the recession is. So we know money is going to be tight. That's all we know.
I mean, clearly we do, without saying, we have to have somebody that's good with being flexible too, and really being able to think outside the box. But I think that I like what you wrote about capacity for innovative thinking and adaptability. I think that's like, I almost feel like that's almost number one at this point.
That's been the hallmark of the Douglas education, the Douglas School Department over the last dozen years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that could be the lead item, because that ties in with all the finance stuff, and I wish Mr. Delaney was here to give his quote about taking 2 dimes and making $1 or whatever his quote is, but yeah. So any objections to this kind of being in our posting? And again, I would say that, as the entire posting gets put together, if Becky and Julie see other things that you want to either edit, add, change, that are in the same light as this, I'm okay with you doing that. If you find something that comes up last second, or Tracy comes up with something that says, maybe we can add that too, I feel comfortable giving you that leeway to make edits as you see fit. Okay, we're good.
Very good. So as soon as it is up, I will let all of you know. And Becky and Julie, I don't know how you want to proceed in terms of putting the screening together, in terms of blasting it out and putting things together, but we can connect either later tonight or tomorrow.
Just Tracy, while you're still here, Miss Becky, so I know you had sent along the questionnaire or whatever it is, a bunch of information that Tracy needs for the posting.
Right. So I'm wondering about the timeline. Like, yeah, we're missing some stuff. I did.
You're pretty close. So I I had a quick exchange with Jennifer and Carrie in the office. I say in the office, they're not really in the office, but earlier this afternoon. And they're not missing much at this point.
Okay.
They were confirming budget, they were confirming enrollment, but I'll do a double check again, and they'll get back to me, I'm sure, first thing in the morning. The one thing that maybe someone in administration could help with is Carrie was having trouble pulling the pictures off the website. If someone actually just has those as images and can shoot me an email, that would be one thing. Because we do try to make these pretty. And you've got schools to show off, so you should do that. But I'll double check again and see if there's anything specific that we're still missing in terms of data. I think we're pretty close.
Okay.
Donna can help with that, Mr. Maines?
Yeah, I think probably Scott Villamere, I think, is probably who took the pictures. So I'll reach out to Donna and Scott and see if they can't get sent along. Should I send them to Tracy, or do you want me to send them to Becky? And then
you can send them straight to me if you want to. That would be great. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
I know there's a salary range in there. Is that somebody, I know I was looking for a recommendation.
So
from you.
that's, yeah, I'm sorry, that's right. You
We're on
asked
the
that,
market.
I didn't get back to you fully. That is also at the discretion of the committee. You really don't need to put, you had asked also, Brett, if you needed, you know, sort of details in terms of other parts of the remuneration, and you really don't, in terms of, you know, vacation days. and
Oh,
everything.
yeah. As far as-
Technically, it's all subject to negotiation anyway.
Yep.
The whether or not you put a salary range is honestly entirely up to you. I would say that we're running about 50-50 in terms of committees deciding to put one in and deciding not to put one in. I mean, Massachusetts not being that big a state, it kind of works in our favor where everybody kind of knows where everybody is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows how much, I mean, superintendent salaries are public information, right? So, you don't have to. I think the numbers that you were talking about, I think we're pretty close to where you're going to end up being anyway.
Okay.
Was my sense from what I know.
Okay.
And you could just put down competitive within the region type of thing. You don't have to put a number. You could just
Yep.
put a narrative, short,
Yeah.
brief narrative.
I agree with that, because you don't want to give a cap.
Yeah, I didn't
But
want to. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not, there's going to be different, you know, out by Boston and stuff. They're not going to be getting paid the same as they do out here. But, you know, we also went that route where we did advertise for a very low salary a few years ago. And, you know, gave us, it weeded some people out that, you know, they just didn't want the job because it was such a low paying job at the time. But that's all the money we had. So I feel like we might be able to get a little bit more candidates if we kind of leave it open-ended a little bit.
Yep.
I like that word, competitive with the region.
Okay. We do have, Heather, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So I know you're watching. So Tracy, I think I mentioned to you that I'm actually an outgoing member of the committee here. Heather is running for the seat. I believe she's running unopposed. She's here this night talking, you know, watching. Figure I'd give her a chance to see if she has any questions of this process, because you're going to be on the committee kind of, we're going to be, you know, switching, you know, crossing paths here in the night during this process. So I just want to give you, see if you have anything to add, Heather. And if you don't, that's fine.
I had to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, I think it's just like everybody's saying is, you know, time is of the essence. Financially too as well. I'm on the finance committee right now, and yeah, like Brett touched on, we're going through a recession. It's how big the recession is going to be and what's the impact to Douglas. I think you're all spot on with how you're trying to approach it as quickly as possible to get the best candidate that we could possibly get. That's all I really have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So anything else for Tracy this evening before we let her go, or she's welcome to stick around if she'd like?
Yeah, Tracy, if we can touch base about that message that we'll send out, I just want to make sure that I'm like on the nose about what the expectations are for people who will want to join the search committee. Timeline is, because I know there were a couple of variables in there, and I don't want to make mistakes with it. So
Okay, I would say we do the same thing. We do a one call with it, and we blast Facebook as much as we can. The sites that we did, that was effective.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree with the method. It's more like I just want to make sure the timeline that I put in there, like this is the timeline, these are the expectations. We need the full commitment. I want to make sure I get those dates right.
Is it
And then we'll want to
typically
decide who's the contact too,
Yeah.
in terms of where the applications are going.
when soliciting screening committee members, is it typically just someone sends you their name, or you ask for any information when you do that?
I have had both. It sometimes it depends on who's making the decision. You want to make sure you get their name and also essentially what slot they're applying for.
Yeah.
As much as I'm sure many of you know most of Douglas, you know, inevitably there's someone we don't know.
Yeah.
Because you're deputizing two of your members to make the decision, if they want essentially someone to make an argument as to why they should be selected, you can certainly ask for that.
I mean, it's not common that we have this overwhelming response to, I want to volunteer. But I mean, seriously, if we got like 3 people that really wanted to volunteer, I mean, and they're just like diehard, I want to be a part of that. I mean, maybe we should just I mean, I can't imagine that we're gonna have that, but I mean, are you still thinking that we should still probably only take one parent, or would you recommend taking 3?
I would just want you to keep in mind the idea of balance on the committee, on the screening committee. So if you get 5 parents that you think would all be great on there, that's gonna, how do you offset that with, number of teachers and administrators and whatnot? So you just gotta keep that in mind, Julie. I hate to turn away folks that want to be involved too, but again, we need to act quickly, and you need to balance this process out. So, okay. All right. Anything else for Tracy? Again, thank you so much for everything you've done for us in a short period of time. We appreciate it, and we'll be talking. So we're planning to meet again next Wednesday. I know you guys will be talking. In the meantime, we'd love to have you back on. Just talk about where we are in the process, and see if there's any questions that we have possibly.
Sure.
Okay, so it'll be next Wednesday, 7 o'clock.
I'll put it in my calendar.
Just so you know, I think we're also inviting our local congressman, so Senator Fatman and Representative McKenna are tentatively on the docket for that evening. So we might get into a nice budget discussion and other topics that maybe you'd love to be part of as well.
And maybe they'll have answers, which would be great.
Yes, would be awesome.
Very good. All right.
Thank you.
Take care, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to find my agenda again. So that just brings us back to Mr. Mains's report, and just we have COVID-19 updates and discussion.
Yeah, so there's obviously not a lot that's changed. I know that we have a tentative date from the governor of May 4th. Based on Mr. Argle's response, we may not be back on May 4th, but I think that's a very realistic position. There are 27 states across the country that actually have shut down their schools for the remainder of the year. We are not one of them at this point in time. I think that, the rollout of a remote learning, and Cindy might be able to speak a little better to this, was a challenge at first. I think that we're settling in pretty well. I know it continues to be a stress and a strain on families, and with regards to parents who are working or parents who are trying to homeschool and work from home, and then also access to technology. There may only be one, computer in the house, and there may be 2, 3, 4 children that might need to use the computer. So we have encouraged our teachers to not exclusively be looking for Zoom and Google Chat meetings all the time, that a lot of it can be independent work. Just a reminder that this is the start of the April vacation week, and the committee voted, and we have no school tomorrow, Tuesday, but we will be holding classes on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. I'm sure that everybody is aware now that the governor did sign off, the legislature did sign off on the MCAS, so there will be no MCAS testing.
So Mr. Mains, I don't know that the district has said anything specifically about that. Has that been part of any of your communications at this point? Or did I miss it?
I think I put that out in a couple of letters, but the update is this, that the legislature signed off on, and I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it was grades 4, 8, and 10 that are mandated. And then the Commissioner Riley opted to close down all of the MCAS testing. And just this week, we heard also that the submission of MCAS alt materials has been canceled for the year as well. So for those students turning in portfolios for consideration, those have been canceled as well. So that will have an impact, obviously, on data. We had a conversation about this in our most recent admin meeting late last week. And we've encouraged our administrators to try to reach out to teachers and use some other form of exit assessments that they can get an idea as to where students are at the end of the school year, which, commonly we use MCAS, but we also use Ames Web, and we've also used the NWEA program. And so we want to have some sort of data as to where we close out. One of the conversations that we also had was waiting on the governor's decision. If the governor were to extend and say close the district for the remainder of the school year, we would want to take advantage of some of the time between now and the end of the school year to have grade level meetings. So, you know, grade 1 meeting with grade 2 teachers so that they can say, listen, normally I would have gotten to point X, but I only got to T. So you'll need to start at point T and get us to point X as a jumping off point in September. So we'll wait on that. But if that is in fact the case, that the governor does decide that he's going to close down schools for, again, either a protracted period of time or for the remainder of the year, if it's for the remainder of the year, we would then look to try to organize and structure a lot of transition meetings between grade levels. I think that's going to be important in planning for teachers to begin their planning for September, where they may be doing some remediation or actual direct instruction on material that's really not in their grade level, just to get us caught up. And I think that's going to be a large task. And one of the things that we were concerned about is specifically at the K1, 2 grade levels, especially because we want to make sure that those initial skills are being addressed. And I don't know, Cindy, if you wanted to jump in on that, but we did have a conversation about that piece of it, especially.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of overarching skills from K to 1 and 1 to 2 in the curriculum, which will help the teachers, but there are also some skills that they won't get to. So if there's a lot of communication between the teachers, it'll be easy for K to 1 because we're all in the same building. It's the 1 to 2 that really will have to have meetings to talk about which standards didn't we get to and where do they fall in that 2nd grade curriculum, so that they'll be aware that the kids won't know those skills right away.
Right, and that's going to be universal, I mean, between all the grade levels, but we always worry most at those formative years, the first few years and so forth. So so there's that information. We know that AP testing is going to go on, although it's going to be dramatically modified, and it is a test that will be taken at home. And I think Josh spoke a little bit about that last meeting that you had. So that'll be a different type of a test. And then the only other thing that I had was that because of the adjustment that we made on the calendar, our final school day right now is June 16th rather than June 19th.
Okay.
And that was pretty much everything I had.
Okay, great. Any questions for Mr. Maines? Okay. Next on our agenda is our school committee and subcommittee reports. And I once again forgot to put, we'll go to Lisa first with accounts payable, and then I'll talk about budget subcommittee as well.
Okay. On April 7th, 2020, I signed 8 batches totaling $32,710.46. And on April 16th, 2020, 4 batches totaling $24,809.41, and nothing unusual.
Okay. Any questions for Lisa? Okay, we did have a budget subcommittee meeting on April 15th. Overall, we just discussed the fact that we still do not have an updated annual town meeting date, other than the fact that the Board of Selectmen have stated that it will not be held on May 4th as initially, which was the initial date. We had some discussion about how we might conduct a public hearing. And actually, that was one of the questions I meant to ask Tracy, so I'll follow up with her offline. Mr. Maines has been working with the admin team on coming up with a budget that reflects what we think is probably closer to reality versus the budget we had been presented with back in February. But right now, we don't have good guidance from the town at this point. The last guidance we did have was we were looking at a 2% increase over our FY20 general fund appropriation. I'm operating under the assumption that that number is going to come in probably closer to 0 to 1% increase over FY20 when we look at FY21. So I think they're working towards at least getting down to a 1% increase over FY20 currently. We are looking to again, Board of Selectmen are meeting tomorrow night, seeing, what comes of that, if they have a, official move on the annual town meeting. Assuming that the annual town meeting gets moved into the June timeframe, we're looking at trying to have a public hearing as early as May 6th, if that is the case. So that would be the earliest we would have our public hearing on our budget is May 6th. But that's all going to be dependent on what happens with the annual town meeting. So under the assumption that annual town meeting gets moved into a June timeframe, we're looking at a May 6th public hearing. So I think that's about it I have on the budget. There's lots of unknowns still right now.
And if I could jump in, it's going to be a challenge to work through this process because we're going to be doing it basically a little bit like this. We will try to we'll see what people's feelings are about face-to-face meetings and if we can orchestrate that by spreading out a little bit. But I did ask all of the admin team to take a look at their budgets and to take a look at places where we might be able to make some reductions without impacting staffing programs and also in technology as well. So we'll continue to work on that. I just want to remind the committee that we do have a June 1 deadline in order to notify anyone if we are going to engage in any reductions in staff, whether it be non-renew or a reduction in force type of decision, because I don't know that we'll be able to get to that 1% number without possibly impacting staffing. So we do have that as a deadline that we just need to keep in mind, that those letters do have to go out by June 1, unless we're able to negotiate with the committee to go to the state date, which is June 15th.
You'll be negotiating with the DTA on that.
Correct. If we can get to an agreement on that, just to buy a couple extra weeks, if that's helpful.
Yeah. Go ahead, Becky. Did you raise your hand?
All right. Yeah, that mostly answers my question. I wasn't sure that we would actually have the information to be able to send out those letters, and it seems, like you're saying.
Unfortunately, what's going to happen is if things get moved off too much, but we do have, some kind of, we know we're not getting, the budget we put forward in February. Let's put it that way. So I think if we just don't have any guidance yet from the town come June 1st, we're going to have to make calls that, we'll probably end up cutting people that maybe can come back, who knows, or non-renewing, however you want to phrase it. So hopefully we get some guidance, prior to then.
I assume that it's possibly on the table that can be a piece of the communication if we don't have all the answers, but we do have to make sort of preemptive cuts that, of course, if we can keep people on and not have to make cuts, then that's what we want to do.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. The only thing with that, Becky, would be that if I were that person who received the notice, the first thing I would be doing is I'd be looking for a guaranteed job.
Absolutely.
So you do run the risk of possibly losing staffing, which Cindy would tell you that has happened in the past, where we've had to make reductions, and when it came time to bring somebody back, again, maybe like done in the past in August, those people had already taken jobs elsewhere. The only thing that goes to our favor in that is that we are not going to be the only district in the state of Massachusetts that's going to be dealing with a difficult budget. So,
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So that's all I had on that. Just while we're here, just some housekeeping. So I have a bunch of budget subcommittee meeting minutes that I think I need to bring forward to have accepted by the committee. Lisa, I'd like to bring forward all the executive session minutes from our discussions with Mr. Maines on his contract. I think we can close that and bring those forward for our next meeting, please. Okay. We are looking to meet on the 29th, which will be next Wednesday. We are looking to have Senator Fatman and Representative McKenna there. And to be able just to, again, go ahead, Mr. Maines.
So I just wanted to let the committee know that I did reach out to them by way of email, and at this point I have not heard back. I believe it was late last week that I did send that out.
Okay. Yeah, we thought it'd be good to kind of at least preview, have them before our public hearing to get, maybe some guidance from them on what's happening at the state level, which might inform what we put forward at the public hearing. Again, assuming that goes forward on May 6th. So we wanted to get them on April 29th and then come back the following week on May 6th with kind of our finalized budget. Again, assuming that town meeting only gets pushed out to June, but still lots to come. So just generally speaking, keep your calendars open, please, for April 29th and May 6th. I don't know if we talked at our last meeting or not, but we did allude to it earlier. The town election is being held still on May 12th. So May 6th will be my last meeting with you guys. Heather will be stepping in. I will be here however you guys need. Outside of that, don't be afraid to call me, please. So, but we're gonna try to get as much done as we can in the next 2 weeks here, 3 weeks. So, okay, all right. Anything else on that? Consent agenda. We had the April 8th meeting minutes. I had one thing here, and maybe Mr. Mange, you can help me with this.
Yep.
It is on page 1, 2, 3 in discussion of to approve assistant special education coordinator position. Sorry, actually page 4. The sentence is, if the hiring is internal, the hire would remain within the DTA contract in an administrative position. I don't think that's an accurate
No,
description.
that's not accurate. So yeah, that what we're doing is, this is not going to be an administrative position. It was going to be, they're going to do a team chair position, and it's what we voted on, and that is the DTA position that would remain. If it's an outside candidate, they would they would have the option to join the DTA. But if it's an internal candidate, they would be able to remain in the DTA. Correct.
Okay. So if our note taker could please make that amendment for us.
I'm sorry, Brett, what page was that?
It was on the page 4. Yes, it was on the last page, towards the top of the page there.
Okay. I'll get that to Lauren.
Okay, thank you. And I know that just Lauren sent a note, so I think our meeting minute taker, stenographer, I'm not sure what I forget the term, is leaving us. So like she has posted that position.
Correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Means?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. So, okay. So if there's no other discussion on our meeting minutes for April 8th, 2020, I'd like to see a motion to approve those minutes as amended this evening.
So
We got a motion from Becky. Okay.
second,
Second from Lisa. Okay. Roll call vote, please. Apparently I'm supposed to go last, so I'm going to wait.
Lisa Brown, aye.
Becky Charniak, aye.
Kelly Grady, aye.
Julie Mulder, aye.
Brett Argel, aye. Okay, so motion passes. Thank you. That's my agenda again. I think that's it for our agenda. Oh, school business and operation manager report. Ms. Keegan couldn't be here this evening. There's a little bit of a cross up, and she thought the Monday meeting was next week. She was with her, it's her son's birthday this evening, so I told her that shouldn't be an issue and that she should be with her son. So we do not have any transfers or reclassification from her this evening. Any other notes from her that you know of, Mr. Maines?
No, nothing at all. She did not.
Sound like.
She just contacted me, told me she would not be able to attend, but nothing else.
Great. Thank you. Topics not anticipated. And I do not believe we need an executive session. I know it kind of come up, and we might want to do that to discuss some of the pieces of the superintendent posting, but I think we've covered everything. I don't see any reason to have an executive session to cover anything else.
I agree.
Okay. So, yeah, just the bottom of our agenda. Yeah, so just note the bottom of our agenda is incorrect. It should say upcoming school committee meetings are April 29th, May 6th, and then it will be May 20th after that. So if there is nothing else this evening, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn at 8:16 p.m.
Brett, can I ask one
Yes,
question?
please.
If Mr. Fatman and Mr. McKenna are not available, do you still want to hold that meeting on the 29th? I will reach out again tomorrow, but
I think it would be nice to check in, leave it on the calendar to check in on the superintendent meeting, the process, the search process.
And Mr. Maines, I can't imagine we wouldn't have some kind of further guidance from the state at that point on school closure. So I think, Lauren's staying.
Okay, so we'll keep it. I'll make sure that it's posted with Lauren.
Yeah, even if it's a quick one. That's, I agree. And to Becky's point too, at least a check-in on things.
Okay.
So. Okay, so look for a motion to adjourn at 8:17 p.m. now.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Lisa,
Second.
second from Becky. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll look for a roll call vote, please.
Lisa Brown, aye.
Becky Charniak, aye.
Kelly Grady, aye.
You're muted, Julie.
Julie's muted. There we go.
Julie Mulder, aye.
Okay, and Brett Argel, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Be safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all.